It is a lovely pleasure to welcome Jocelyn Pettit and Ellen Gira. They are respectively a fiddler from British Columbia and a cellist from Maryland. They recently collaborated on the album All It Brings, which earned them the Canadian Folk Music Award for Traditional Album of the Year. Jocelyn, Ellen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us on here.
Yeah, I should like to begin by congratulating you on winning the award. What was it like?
Wow,
I don't think
such
it's completely sunk in just yet.
no, such an honor. Definitely being in St. John's, Newfoundland, and being surrounded by so many wonderful people in this folk music community, and receiving this recognition for our album, All It Brings, for traditional album of the year. It was definitely a big honor amongst such a vibrant traditional music community here in Canada, and it was really special to be there and to receive this award.
It was just an honor to be nominated and to meet all of the other wonderful nominees and learn about their wonderful contributions to the folk scene in Canada. It was just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, yeah. I have a few friends who were nominated for the award show this year as well as in the previous year, and regardless who won, I certainly got to know a lot of the diversity of Canadian folk music then because of it, because of the show.
Yes, that's amazing. Yes, there's so many wonderful musicians.
Now, for the benefit of the listeners, I think you'd like to clarify which one of you is Jocelyn and which one of you is Ellen. So, yeah, could you please do that?
I'm Jocelyn Pettit, here on the west coast of Canada.
And I'm Ellen. I play the cello, and I'm over on the East Coast of the United States in Maryland.
hmm Okay, so right from the start, I should acknowledge that your last name is Pettit, right? Jocelyn.
Yes.
So I
Mm-hmm.
pronounce it the French way, so petite.
Yes, we have French roots actually, so that's okay. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Um, yeah, so Maryland and British Columbia are quite a ways away. So I wonder, how did you guys come to know each other?
Yeah, we met when we were studying over in Scotland, in
Mhm.
Glasgow, at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. We were both working towards our master's degrees in traditional Scottish music, and we began playing together. And now here we are. So it's been a really fun adventure.
Mhm. Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah. So how did you come to Glasgow then? What did you study there?
Well, it's Glasgow is such a hub for traditional music, and their music scene there is very vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
That's what drew both of us there, and finding this really international community was really special. You know, a lot of our friends were from other countries around the world, and to be able to share music from each of our home countries and play together, as well as playing the traditional Scottish music that drew us there in the first place. That was really an amazing experience.
Cool. Okay. And was traditional music a big part of your lives growing up?
Here on the West Coast, yes, I was inspired by the Cape Breton Scottish music, first of all, from Cape Breton, and the lively, danceable spirit of it. First picked up the fiddle at age 8. First heard it at age 5, and then picked up at age 8, and definitely have always loved the traditional sounds.
Mhm.
Yeah. And on this end, it was sort of a longer journey to traditional music for me. I began playing classical piano when I was 6, and then classical cello when I was 11 through my public school orchestra over here in Maryland. And I was eventually converted to folk and traditional music while I was a student at the Cleveland Institute of Music, which is a very classical orchestra oriented conservatory. I found the need to sort of explore my own cultural roots, which led me to trad music and then Scotland, where I met Jocelyn.
Mhm. Um, Tell me about your Easters. How did you spend it?
our
Oh, we were
Easter.
together.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Here.
Yes, we were this past year, you mean?
Oh, yeah. So 2024, this current year, I
Yes,
suppose.
we were in Maryland.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Yeah.
we were at Ellen's house. We had just finished our East Coast spring tour,
Mhm.
and we were getting ready to go up to Newfoundland for the awards. So we were, yes, finishing up a writing week actually
For
between the
album
spring.
number 2 coming
Yes,
soon.
coming soon.
Yeah.
Yes, so after the spring tour, we had a writing week
Mhm.
working up new material for the next album,
Oh,
which will be
wonderful.
recorded this summer, and then going up to Newfoundland and then returning back to our respective homes.
Oh, great. So do you have a working title for the album yet, as well as a release date potentially?
To be confirmed next
Yeah.
year,
Oh,
definitely.
okay.
Yeah. Working
Yes.
title is TBD. Yeah.
Stay tuned. Yes, we're working on lots of new material, some traditional and original material to record partly in Vancouver in late June, early July of this summer, and then partly in Montreal in the fall.
Mhm. Okay, good to hear. And I certainly look forward to welcoming you guys on the show again, once the album is released, the second one, I
Thank
mean.
you. Thanks very much.
Tell me about the recording process of your first collaborative album, as I've mentioned, All It Brings.
Yeah, most of the recording took place in Scotland, where we met. It was at a lovely little studio called Grand's House Studios out in Biggar, Scotland, where I remember driving to the studio even, and there were lots of sheep, and hills that we drove past, and it was just they were just idyllic surroundings in which to record the album. Um, yeah, and I should actually mention that some of this material as well on All It Brings was originally from our master's recitals over at the RCS. And I think, yeah, it was just really great to see this music come full circle and, come up with it and really rehearse it in Scotland and then perform it over on the other side of the pond has been really fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I'd love to visit Scotland at some point. I think I'm obviously because of where I am, I'm closer to Scotland than either
Mm,
of you right now.
you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing Glasgow was where you recorded the album.
So it was in a little town called Biggar, Scotland. Although, so Biggar, Scotland, Grand's House Studios is where we recorded the album. We were also joined by a wonderful guitarist, Adam Dobries,
Mhm.
recorded in, was it Pender Island?
Pender Island. So
Yes.
over on the west coast here in Canada. So
Mhm.
he added his guitar parts from his home studio, and then we mixed it all together, and that's the finished album.
Mhm.
So we're really happy to have Adam a part of it.
Mhm. Yes, and tell me about how you managed to, I guess, mix the sounds of the fiddle as well as the cello together, because I find it to be a very unique combination.
Yeah, we were
Absolutely.
working with a wonderful mixing engineer, Angus Lyon, who really just helped us to get the levels all exactly as we wanted them to make sure that everything was balanced, especially playing with both cello and guitar. These are both very, very low end instruments with very strong rhythmic percussive sounds at times. So really getting them balanced against the fiddle and some of Jocelyn's foot percussion. It's a really fun balance to achieve, but yeah, Angus was wonderful in helping us with that.
Hmm. Also doing a lot of this live off the floor, a lot of the tracks on All It Brings. We ended up using the first take because of the energy. We
Mhm.
did subsequent takes and then chose the first one because nothing else matched that energy of the first time playing it through. So when we play acoustically or when we're playing live, we love to really work on those dynamics and the balance between the instruments.
Mhm. Yeah. So tell me about the title of the album. How did it become? How did it come up?
All It Brings. Well, the title track is called All It Brings, actually.
Mhm.
And this was a track that we had co written without intending to. I had written this song called All It Brings, which was inspired by sunrise over here on the West Coast. And these feelings of hope and possibility, new beginnings. It was in the time of the pandemic, and I was just really inspired by being in nature as much as possible. So one of the lines in the songs is, "Look to the sky, the simple things, a new day and all it brings." So this feeling of being open to each new day, and each new day being a beginning, and just letting whatever come your way, just being open to that. So that was the song, and we ended up taking a line from the song and just putting that to the whole album's theme of hope and resilience. And Ellen had actually written a tune to go with the song.
Yes, they also wrote a tune called "In Hope" that wasn't originally intended to go with the song, but it just works so well. I wrote it, it's called "In Hope," and I wrote it just as we were beginning to come out of a lot of these pandemic era restrictions we were having, where live music was just beginning to return again. We were just beginning to gather in person. And so we knew that we wanted to record Jocelyn's song all at Reagan's, and so we were thinking it'll be nice to have some sort of instrumental tune that we can arrange with it and maybe interweave them. And then I thought of "In Hope," and they just work so well together that we're like, okay, they just these need to be a medley, and so that became the title track.
Well, this one is for Jocelyn. I think in the same year that All It Brings was released, you also released a solo album. It's titled Wind Rose. Do tell us a bit about that album.
Yes, it was a busy time, that's for sure. Yes, Windrose was the culmination of my time in Scotland. So a lot of that music was either written or arranged while I was in Scotland, and recorded both in Scotland with Ellen and some other Scottish guest musicians, and also here on the West Coast with my BC-based band members. So I have a band, the Jocelyn Pettit Band, here on the West Coast, and the BC musicians are just amazing, with bass, whistle, guitar, piano, percussion, and they're part of a lot of the album as well. So it's really celebrating this connection between being away from home and then coming home, and all those influences. The title Windrose refers to a windrose being a compass. So a compass is the original. Windrose is the original name for the compass, the ancient nautical compass, and a tool to read the direction of the winds. And with Squamish, my hometown, being named Mother of the Wind in the local Indigenous language, it's a very windy place here. There's a lot of windsurfing and wind sports, and so there's this connection with the winds. So Windrose felt like a suitable title, and just a metaphor for something that helps you find your way. So coming home from Scotland and being back here on the West Coast, I was having all these themes going of finding direction, being home, and that's the theme behind Windrose.
That's wonderful. So Ellen, my question to you is, so you're doing a PhD right now, as you've mentioned in your, Instagram bio. So tell me about that.
So, oh gosh, how to summarize it in very very short terms? It is in trad cello pedagogy. So what I do with Jocelyn and with some other projects is exploring the cello within various fiddle traditions, which has been a super exciting journey. There's lots of percussive accompaniment and lots of fiddle tunes, and all these different techniques that we have to learn. And so it's been interesting to study how these different techniques are both taught and learned within the traditional music community. And so that's been what my PhD is focused on. Actually, just before this podcast interview, I also had a little meeting with someone at the Royal Conservatoire where I'm doing my PhD, as to how the panel assessment will take place, which is coming up soon. So yeah, I'm definitely at the tail end, which is exciting.
That's it.
Yeah.
So you almost finished with it then?
Yes, yeah, almost less than a month to go. Actually, I mean, there's not too much to do to prepare for the assessment, but it's been submitted. It's all the final all the final fixings. So yeah,
Okay.
great.
I would imagine that by the time this episode comes out, you will have finished the program already. So
Probably.
congratulations
I
again.
might be Dr. Gira by the time it comes out, which is wild to say, but
Yeah,
yeah.
congratulations to you.
Oh, thank you.
And which university is the PhD you're doing with?
Yeah, so the program is a partnership between the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland and St. Andrews University. So I believe the degree is conferred by St. Andrews, but all the teaching and all of the research and things are done at the Conservatoire, which is also where Jocelyn and I did our masters.
Oh, okay. That's great. Yeah. I believe there's a single that you released last year too, is titled Glad Farewell. It does not belong in the album. So tell me more about that.
That's a separate track
Mhm.
outside of All It Brings. So that was a track that we had recorded around the same time as All It Brings in Grant's house studio. And we had decided to release it separately to keep new music coming out between All It Brings and this next new album that's coming. So that was a set of two of our favorite tunes. We have Farewell to Wally Range, which is a wonderful slipshake, and then into Glodlot, which is a Swedish tune. So that's the glad and farewell part
Mhm.
of it.
Yeah, Låt means the happy tune in Swedish,
Uh-huh.
which it certainly
Mm-hmm.
has that
Yes.
that mood about it. And then a little note about the recording of this set as well. I don't think we were originally planning to record Glad Farewell. We were planning the flow of our album recording, but it was just going so swimmingly. We were ahead of schedule. We were reasonably we had reasonable energy levels at the end of the day, and I think we had like 30 minutes or so to spare and thought, let's do another track. And so this just off the cuff nature, I think, came through in the recording where we're just having fun. We have some time to spare, and I think the mood certainly carried
Mm-hmm.
through. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. That is actually the first single where I was introduced to the works of both of you. Jocelyn, you may know that in the West Coast there are these two great fiddler duo, Annika Wilson and Daniel Leonard. Together they formed the
Yes.
Twin Embers. That's
Yes,
how I
they're
got to know you guys
wonderful.
from. Yeah, they're wonderful too. So, Jocelyn, tell us a bit about the folk scene over in the West Coast BC area where you belong to.
Yes, there's definitely a wonderful community over here on the West Coast. There's a growing traditional music scene, I would say. There's a lot of influence from Ireland and Scotland and the Cape Breton music as well. You know, people moving around and a lot of people over here on the coast having the Celtic heritage. There are a lot of events celebrating Celtic music. There's Vancouver Celtic Fest, which happens in March. There's the BC Highland Games, which is a Scottish festival that happens in June. And that's, I believe, Western Canada's largest games, Highland Games. There's also just south of the border in Washington, there's the Bellingham Highland Games and Mount Vernon. That whole area has a lot of wonderful Scottish music and Scottish heritage. We also have on the West Coast here lots of wonderful folk venues. There's the Rogue Folk Club in Vancouver, which brings in such incredible talent from all around the world. So we're very fortunate to have people that are spreading the folk music, going out to live music concerts, presenters that are bringing in wonderful acts. You know, some of the other folk festivals, Vancouver Folk Fest, Mission Folk Fest, Harrison Festival in the summertime. Those are all wonderful events. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to hear folk music and hear traditional music live. I think in the communities, just having more and more exposure to the traditional music is really important. And I'm trying to do that here in Squamish, my hometown, through teaching and creating events for people to come and play traditional music together, you know, sessions, the traditional sessions, which happen more so in the cities. You'll find them in Vancouver and Victoria, BC, but not so much in the smaller towns. So trying to do more here in Squamish.
Mhm. Yeah, I had a good fortune to visit Vancouver twice.
Mm.
Although the second time was when my flight back to my home country of Vietnam was delayed, so it
Oh,
was
okay.
not the most happy occasion. But
Oh.
I enjoyed the first time especially. Yeah, I like the weather there a lot.
Mm. Do you like the rain?
Um,
It rains a fair bit.
I think I wasn't there during when it's rainy, so maybe I
Okay,
missed
good.
that.
Yes, yes, the summertime is usually quite warm and the springtime is a nice time of year, but it's been a little rainy recently.
Mhm. What about you, Alan? Does it rain as much where you are in Maryland?
Right now it's not too bad, although we do get a fair bit of storms, especially in late summer. We get very humid and very hot, and the thunderstorms are something. But yeah, right now it's pretty mild, late spring, early summer weather. So it's pleasant.
And tell us about the folk music scene there.
That's been really excited to be involved in lately as well. I just moved back here actually recently after 7 years of living in Scotland. So it's been
Mhm.
so much fun to reconnect with the wonderful folk scene here. It's nice because I'm between DC and Baltimore, which both have their own folk scenes, and they often sort of um, connect with each other as well. I teach at a couple of music schools that focus on folk music, one in Tacoma Park and one in Baltimore. And yeah, it's been actually for the past couple of weekends, there have been a couple of really exciting sort of folk music and traditional music festivals over in Maryland. First, there was the Baltimore Trad Fest, which celebrates Irish traditional music up in Baltimore, and then last weekend was the Baltimore Old Time Festival, which celebrates music from the Appalachians. Some bluegrass made its way in as well, and so it's been great to see both of these scenes thriving. Lots of great venues as well, similar to Jocelyn's neck of the woods.
Mhm. Yeah, I've heard a lot about Appalachian culture and life. They obviously the economic disadvantages aside, they seem to have like a wonderful, Scots Irish culture that can sometimes be misunderstood by Americans who are not part of that scene.
Yeah, it's also really interesting to study the connection between Appalachian music and their ancestral Irish and Scottish tunes. You can definitely tell a number of them, descend directly. There will actually be, I should mention, a track on our next album that juxtaposes two of these tunes. One is a very traditional Scottish strathspey that we played the very traditional version of it that comes right out of the 1797 collection, and then the next tune is called The Graspy, and it came out right. It came right out of that Strathspey, and you can definitely hear that resemblance. And the same is true of a number of tunes. I've been brushing up on my old time tunes as well, inspired by the Baltimore Old Time Fest. And I was learning a tune called The Yellow Barber, and I was like, huh, this is kind of familiar as I'm playing it, and it comes from a Scottish tune called "O'er the Moor," which Jocelyn and I have also played
Hmm,
together. So it's really interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to visit Maryland or even America yet, but my dad has been to Baltimore and I think he was visiting Johns Hopkins University and he got a chance to go over to DC and visit the big house, the White House too. He enjoyed it quite a bit.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a neat area. Lots of history.
Yes. Yeah, and I know a lot of friends who live around that DC area too.
Mm.
Um, So tell me about your respective musical influences. Jocelyn, you first.
Sure. Yes. Well, there's definitely the Celtic roots. My own heritage is Scottish, Irish, French, and then Malaysian on my mom's side. So I'm influenced by these respective heritages and the Celtic music that runs through Scotland, Ireland, and the other Celtic nations. So the the areas of Brittany in France and Galicia in Spain. Those are wonderful areas of Celtic music, and these these cultures. So yes, inspired by my heritage, but also by places visited through travels and through our touring, learning from musicians in the areas that we tour. It's always great to have those musical exchanges, sharing the traditional tunes from our home countries.
Mhm.
So yes.
Okay. Ellen, what about yours?
Yeah, so yeah, as I mentioned before, I was originally a classical cellist, and I think that that's played a role in my voice as well, having that grounding in sort of like the classical technique, and some of those wonderful compositions from the classical tradition have made their way into how I play trad music to some extent. I think also studying over in Scotland has given me quite a few Irish and Scottish influences, and then my mom's side of the family are very they're quite Appalachian. We can trace our lineage, back to the 1600s over in the Appalachian Mountains, and so it's also been really fun to explore those roots as well through old time music and through just a bit of bluegrass as well. And so, yes, Jocelyn mentioned it's fun to really draw from all these different traditions, and yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, in regards to bluegrass, I should mention one of my favorite artists, Alison Krauss. She's one of the
Mm,
greats in that
she's
tradition.
fantastic. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, she's also I believe a fiddler, but people know her better by her
Mm.
voice. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Her voice is just iconic. It's beautiful.
So tell me about your tour in support of All It Brings.
Yeah, I think
Well,
we've had a number of tours in
there's
support of
been
All It Brings. It's been a
several
whirlwind.
tours. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
The first tour, well, the first summer that it was released, we were touring here on the West Coast in BC, and then over on the East Coast in the US and Ontario and Quebec. So we had, yes, quite the road trip going from Toronto down through Quebec and New England all the way down to Maryland. Then the second year we were over in the UK. So we did a UK tour, Scotland, England, and Wales.
Yeah.
Ireland soon, hopefully.
Hmm.
and then uh, and then there was another East Coast tour through Ontario again, Quebec, New England, East Coast of the US, and then up to Cape Breton. We were at Celtic Colors last fall, which was a really special event in Nova Scotia. And then more touring on the West Coast here in BC, down the west coast of Washington State, Seattle, Bellingham, and then up around BC again. And then we were in Saskatchewan actually at a festival called the Midwinter Celtic Festival. So we flew there, and that was in February of this year. And then we were back on the East Coast. We were in Maryland again. We've been traveling a fair bit here. And then New England, and then recently Newfoundland, which was both of our first time in Newfoundland. So yes,
I
we're very
hadn't realized
grateful.
just how much we've been traveling until you've like outlined all of this.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We're very grateful for all these opportunities to perform for new audiences, to see friends old and new, and just experience these wonderful locations.
What do you believe is the best as well as the most challenging part of all that traveling?
Ooh,
Mm, that's a great question.
that is a really good question. There's so much planning that goes into these tours. We do all our own bookings and we organize all the details, from the bookings to the visas and the grant applications, and just so much admin that goes on behind the scenes. So when the tour itself takes place, it's really thrilling to have all this hard work come to fruition and to be on stage with these audiences. But yes, definitely there are lots of challenges along the way when you're independent musicians and
Yeah.
juggling many aspects.
Yeah, definitely both from the logistical perspective, as Jocelyn mentioned. I also find of course, there's a spectrum between extroversion and introversion. I'm pretty far on the introversion side. And so while it's so gratifying to perform for people, it's easy to get tired, and so it's always a work-life balance. Like being very active and social, but also making sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you're able to get the rest that you need. And so that's been a balance that we've needed to cultivate while we're on the road.
I see.
Yeah.
So tell us more about how your creative partnership develops.
Yes. Well, it's really exciting when we're working on new music.
Mhm.
You know, some of our pieces are co-written from the beginning. We have a new piece on this next album that we wrote together actually as a commission. It was a really good friend here on the West Coast that asked us to write a piece for his granddaughter. And so we wrote this piece and then we've expanded it into an arrangement. So some of them will co-write the melody from the beginning. Some of them are written by one of us individually, and then we'll come together and arrange it. Some of the melodies are traditional, like Ellen was saying, with the Strathspey from Scotland into the old time tune, where it's the same tune and we're tracing this journey. That's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really fun to make
I
those
think,
arrangements.
yeah, and I think part of the reason as well why we've been able to co-compose tunes and why our creative partnership has worked so well is that I think already our musical slash compositional voices aren't that far from each other even before we began collaborating. I think our influences within traditional music are relatively similar, and so that's why the creative partnership also just worked right off the bat, and it's continued to develop from there.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Um, I know that in the album, All It Brings, there are a few songs where there's vocals on the track, and I wonder which one it was. Which of you
Oh,
sang?
we're
Oh,
Oh,
both
really?
both.
singing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, we trade verses back and
Mhm.
forth. So oftentimes we'll alternate who's singing the melody, who's singing the harmony, and then going
Oh.
back and forth. Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes.
been another thing. Just like our musical voices are quite similar, I think that our voices are also quite similar as well, just in terms
Mm-hmm.
of their tones. And so that's why it's funny that I think other people have also asked which one of you is singing it, which one of you, but it's actually both.
Mhm.
So I think it's nice to also be able to harmonize in live performances too. It's been really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. So were you guys trained in vocalizations before?
Over here, I did some vocal coaching from a young age, and have always just loved singing. It's been a part
Mhm.
of a part of my music.
Yeah, and I've always loved singing as well. That's part of why my mom originally got me piano lessons is because I wouldn't stop singing. And so it's like, okay, well, let's give her an outlet for that. I haven't had many vocal lessons, although I always participated in children's choruses growing up, and until cello took over, that is. But it was always another passion of mine.
Yeah. So tell me about your processes in learning your respective instruments, Jocelyn with the fiddle and Ellen with the cello. I find that unfortunately, as much as I would like to learn an instrument, I don't seem to have enough either patience or interest to actually commit to the process.
Yes, it's definitely a process, and finding an instrument that really speaks to you, that really draws you in, is it's exciting. It's definitely, maybe maybe you haven't found the right instrument yet.
Yeah.
Certainly.
But
Yeah.
it's yes, with the fiddle, it was, I started playing when I was 8, and the first summer of playing, my family and I were living in Ontario actually for the year, and driving back across Canada to the West Coast, moving back home. And I had really, really wanted to pick up the fiddle after hearing it at age 5, at a young age. And my family had enrolled me in this summer camp. So, with the traditional music, fiddle camps are such a huge part of the learning tradition and just the way of passing on music through generations and also bringing people together from all over. So I was enrolled in this fiddle camp and had been playing I just started on our journey across the country. So been playing for a few weeks and then went to this fiddle camp on Vancouver Island, and it was an inspiring start. It was definitely a challenge to keep up after only having been playing for a couple of weeks, but my first teacher there was super supportive, and it was a good start. And then from there, just learning, my teacher in Vancouver was wonderful, very supportive, and I would learn both from him and then also from visiting instructors that were coming through from Ireland or from Scotland or other parts of Canada. So learning a combination of by ear and with the music, but learning a lot of the tunes by ear and through a lot of just listening to recordings and soaking in the music as much as possible.
Yeah, and then over on this end, I began with pretty much all classical training over here in Maryland. There was this instrument petting zoo that my school had over here, and I was able to try the cello. And I remember plucking the lowest string that we have, the C string, and thinking that it sounded like a foghorn. I'm like, I gotta play that. I like the low sound. And so yeah, from there I started in my school orchestra, and then I got private lessons. And so a lot of this, in contrast to Jocelyn's learning, I was all by sheet music. Being very much in the classical tradition, I participated in lots of string quartets, and I did various youth orchestras, and I was able to do. There's a really great local organization here called the Maryland Classic Youth Orchestras, which is really fun. And then I went to a conservatory because at that point I thought that I wanted to be an orchestral cellist, and then I found traditional music. And that was definitely a tradition. That was a transition in terms of learning as well, because then I needed to learn how to learn by ear, learning how to play with others at sessions, and it's just been such a fun adventure.
So, what are some of your favorite things about traditional slash folk music, particularly from the British Isles?
It's such wonderful, fun music. You know, it's hard not to be moved by it in some way. I think it's very accessible and a community oriented form of music. The the traditions dating back to the dance halls, you know, music to dance to, music to celebrate, music that brings people together and creates that community,
Yeah.
and just, you know, spans over so many generations, cultures. It just feels like it's joyful music that brings people together and creates that connection.
Yeah, and I think from this end as well. I mean, the community has been really wonderful to get to know. I mean, there's of course competition in every scene, but I feel like it's just experienced differently in the traditional music scene. There's more joy, as Jocelyn put it, which has been really nice. But also, what's been really inspiring listening to other traditional artists is how they've been able to incorporate the old and the new. And I think that's what Jocelyn and I strive to do as well, but incorporating traditional influences alongside innovative new trends or new techniques. And so in that way, it's a living tradition. And so it's just really it's exciting to be a part of that and to see not only where the tradition has been, but where it's going, where it's continuing to move. And that's been really special.
Yeah. So you mentioned the pandemic earlier. How did you manage to survive it?
Well, just like everyone, adapting with the times and trying to keep making music however we could. We were apart for 18 months, so we were on opposite coasts. I was here on the West Coast, Ellen was in Maryland. So we couldn't actually be together in the same place, but we were trying to continue collaborating. We were writing, we were both doing a lot of our own composing as well as having weekly Zoom calls. We had
Oh,
a
so
lot of
many
Zoom
Zoom
meetings
calls.
to just to stay on the same page, to go over new ideas together, to plan for our album. So
Mhm.
much of the behind the scenes planning for the album was done when we were on opposite coasts. So all the logistics involved with that,
Yeah.
just keeping up with all of that, and both teaching a lot. We were both doing a lot of online teaching in our communities and doing live stream shows. We were continuing to connect with our audiences through technology. So with the live stream shows, making those split screen videos and having to learn a lot of new skills when it comes to video
Oh yeah.
production and audio recording and
Yeah.
putting all of that together.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
trying
that
to
was
keep
something.
those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. That was something during the pandemic. I think we both really missed that atmosphere of the live performance, really being able to connect people in person, getting to know them. And so we were trying to find new creative ways of making that happen. And so as Jocelyn mentioned, we did at one point put together an entire split screen concert where I recorded my cello part in the US. Jocelyn recorded her fiddle part in Canada, and then our friend Ali Hutton also recorded his guitar parts in Scotland. And then we put them together. And so, yeah, we just
Mm-hmm.
tried our best to continue to find new ways of creating community and still doing what we do as traditional musicians.
So I'm guessing you guys jump at the first opportunity whenever like live music opens up and you get a show going on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely when it was safe to travel again and we could start to, slowly go back out into public spaces, we were definitely eager to do performances again, starting out with outdoor shows and
Mhm.
distanced and then eventually going back to some touring.
Yeah.
So it was a process.
Yeah, and here we are.
Here we
Yeah.
are.
So tell me about how you guys are going to spend summer of this year.
Well, it's going to be
Well,
an
yeah.
exciting
And
summer.
some
We're
great places.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're starting out here on the West Coast. As I mentioned, we'll be recording in Vancouver in late June, July, and then we are hosting a fiddle and cello retreat, which has become an annual event here in Squamish, my hometown, and it's so much fun to bring together mainly adult learners of all levels, all instruments. We focus on fiddle and cello, but we're definitely open to other instruments. We've had bowed dulcimer join, we have guitar, we have this year a double bass. So it's very open to all instruments. Anyone that's interested in ensemble playing and learning together, just having that, as we mentioned, that community. So we'll be hosting that weekend of workshops, concert, and jam session, July 6th, 7th. And then after that, we'll be back in our respective home areas. Ellen will be back on the East Coast, but then we reconvene in Sweden. We're doing a Sweden tour, which is very exciting. That's a new collaboration with a Swedish duo called Woodlands,
Yeah.
who we
Yeah.
met in Scotland, actually.
Yeah, we were both studying together on the exact same master's course that Jocelyn and I met through over in Glasgow. And yeah, they're a wonderful fiddle and harp duo called Woodlands. I think they're both from Sweden, although their fiddler is now based in Glasgow as well. And together, our show is called Atlantic Crossing. And so, yeah,
Hmm.
we'll be coming up with some new music for that and playing and bring that to festivals and venues throughout Sweden.
Wow.
Yeah, we're
Yes,
excited to explore that part of the world.
definitely. It'll be our first time in Sweden, and we're very excited for this new collaboration.
Yeah.
In September, we'll be back in Ontario and Quebec. We'll be recording more of the album with a guitarist in Montreal, Everest Whitman.
Mhm.
So we'll be in Montreal, and then we'll be doing some shows around Ontario in September and early October. So it'll definitely keep us busy.
Oh yes. Um,
Mhm.
how would you compare the folk music scene of, say, the Canadian East Coast with, Jocelyn, the West Coast Canadian folk scene, and Alan, the, well, American East Coast music scene?
Yes, well, the East Coast of Canada has an amazing tradition. Cape Breton, of course, with the Scottish influence and the style of fiddle playing that's just so iconic. So that that style, you'll find Cape Breton fiddlers here on the West Coast as well. I would say the West Coast has a little bit more of an Irish influence with a lot of Irish musicians, in addition to the Scottish musicians, as I mentioned, with events like Scotfest BC and the Highland Games. There's a big Scottish community here as well, but you'll definitely find more of a mix, I would say, between the Irish, the Scottish. There's old time here as well. There's the Quebecois. You'll find French Canadian. My town of Squamish is very francophone. A lot of people come for the outdoor recreation from Quebec and from other parts of the country. So there's definitely that French influence out here as well. There's influences from other styles too, like gypsy jazz and swing and other styles of fiddle. So I would say it's a little bit more of a mix here. But I mean, you'll find those multicultural aspects in other places too. But Vancouver is definitely a very multicultural city in particular.
Yeah, there's been sort of a similar mix in Maryland and DC as well. And it's been interesting to see how there's some geographic lines as well in the DC area that sort of that the fiddle scene follows. In broad strokes, sort of DC and below, so like Northern Virginia, the scene tends to be very Scottish, which is really neat. And then sort of north of the DC area into Baltimore is very Irish. And also the old time scene is very strong, especially as you move into Western Maryland with the Allegheny and the Appalachian Mountains. And so the convergence of traditions has been really cool to explore. And there's also the mix is continuing to grow as well. There's some wonderful Scandi musicians in the area that are really leading some of the Scandi sessions, and lots of square dances. We even have like a few ball folk things coming up in the DC area, and so it's really exciting to see the interest in traditional music in this area blossom, and the style is just continuing to become more and more diverse, and more people becoming involved. That's been great.
Yeah, so tell me about your respective interests other than music, and to what extent do they converge?
Yes, well, I'm very avid in hiking and exploring the outdoors. Living in a place with a lot of outdoor recreation, the mountains, the ocean, there's a lot to explore. So I would definitely say that influences my compositions. It's being inspired a lot by nature and the environment and being outside. And also the dancing. So I do step dancing as well, which goes hand in hand with the music, with the dance traditions of this music. So trying to incorporate the dancing as much as possible, both in everyday life and in our shows.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you ask about things that we do outside music. I'm like, I was struggling to think, what else do I do outside music? Because it's sort of our whole lives. But I've really enjoyed history. Has also been a really big influence of mine. It's played a big role in my PhD. I always took lots of history classes, but I think that's part of what's interested me about about a lot of this folk traditional music stuff is the interplay between music and culture, and how music has sort of continued to shape the way that we live our lives. I think that's been really interesting to study, and the role that music has played.
Yeah, in response to Ellen, yeah, so I'm a big history fan too. I think this show deals with a lot of history, American and otherwise. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but your home state, Maryland, is the site of like quite a few Civil War battlefields, right?
Oh yes, yeah. It was Maryland was at one point quite a contentious territory, especially in the Civil War. We are very just right south of what's called the Mason-Dixon line, which is why if you look at a map of our state, the border is just it's just straight across, which that at one point was the border between the Union, the North, and the Confederacy, the South. And so because we were so close to that line, we did have quite a few battles. I think at one point Washington D.C., which is just it's not a part of Maryland, but it's right next to us. At one point, that was the capital of the Confederacy. So we were right in the middle there.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of Abraham Lincoln material lately. Like I think I almost have like an unhealthy obsession with the 16th president of the United States, and I guess perhaps understandably so. He was a phenomenal figure.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just really interesting to visit a lot of these historical sites as well. And as a result, I think that's definitely seeped into Maryland's musical history as well.
Mhm,
Um, yeah, to sort of visit some of these historical sites, and some there's some historical tunes or old time tunes that have all of these place names in them, and so it's really interesting to connect these locations and what happened there with the tunes.
mhm. So, tell me about your respective teaching jobs. You both teach music, so how do you enjoy?
Yes, it's a big part of what we do. Sharing this music, sharing the joy and the love of music with people of all ages and passing it on to the next generation. I think that's really important for us as as mentioned earlier, just keeping this tradition alive and sharing
A
it with
living tradition. Yeah.
yes, exactly, sharing it with as many people as possible. I teach here in Squamish at the local music school, Squamish Academy of Music, as well as my home studio, which is in person and online. So people are around the globe, which is really exciting with technology here, how we can connect with people around the world, and also teaching workshops, through the retreat in the summer and through workshops on tour when we're in different communities, going in and leading fiddle and cello workshops.
Mhm. Yeah, and my teaching is quite similar to Jocelyn in that I also have a personal studio both in person and online, and then I also teach at a couple of music schools in this area. One closer to DC called the School of Musical Traditions, and one in Baltimore called the 4 Hour Day Blue Fury. So it's been great to engage with the community in those ways.
Yeah, you both mentioned the importance of keeping tradition alive, and I think because of the name of the podcast, I find that there's always a clash, either subterranean or overt, between what is traditional and what is modern. You find it in every parent-child relationship, my own included, and also every sort of like a you know I guess argument or debate that's going on. What are some things that we lose or gain with the advent of modernity? So I guess in the realm of music specifically, what do you believe are some of the things that you can do to keep the tradition going?
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, no,
I mean,
that's such a
yeah.
great question. And I
Hmm.
think that's something that we sort of it's definitely a balance that we strive to cultivate as traditional musicians, trying to find this balance between like modernity, but also passing on what has long been established. Interestingly, that's also come up in my PhD quite a bit. That's something that a lot of trad cello teachers have debated because there are traditional techniques, but also new things like the percussive chopping and newer tunes. And I ended up conceptualizing it on a spectrum from like foundation to innovation. And I think that's true of a lot of scenes within the traditional music world. I think ideally, I think Jocelyn and I both strive for somewhere in the middle, striving as to draw from what's long been established, but also embracing what's going on right now. And I think there is a happy medium that we can find. Of course,
Definitely. And
that's always a balance, and there are always going to be debates.
I think with teaching, I try to teach my students a mix of some of the traditional tunes and then also newly written ones that are still in the tradition, but a little bit more contemporary, or incorporating tech, contemporary techniques in the melodies, like some of the melodies having more syncopation, or just techniques that we're working on in our lessons, trying to find music that will really connect with each individual student and be exciting for them to learn. That's the main goal, that the music is fun for them to learn and exciting and makes them want to keep going with it.
Yeah. And also, I mean, often traditional music is viewed through the lens of this dichotomy between the tradition with a capital T and it's what's long been done, and then all these newer techniques. And I think it's also really important to remember that even what's been long been established for centuries and centuries, at one point that was new. At one point that was the novel idea. I mean, even if we go through to the really old Scottish collections and look at some of the accompaniment lines that were written, because we do have some, they incorporated at that time new techniques like Alberti bass. There was some contrapuntal writing when these were published during the Baroque period. And so I think it's important to remember that traditional music has always been drawing from what's been going on around it. So even the older tradition was always forward thinking to some extent. So it's a balance that musicians have been trying to cultivate for ages.
Okay. So how have you both influence and inspire one another musically or otherwise?
Oh, I think definitely bringing our influences together has been a really exciting and inspiring process, drawing from each of our diverse backgrounds and then bringing that together to work on new music together. I definitely, from this end, I hadn't done as much of the old time music before
I
meeting
was just
Ellen.
gonna
And
say I haven't done as much French Canadian, and so we've kind of swapped traditions in that way.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of sharing and exchanging and learning from each other's backgrounds. I think that's been really, yes, a really great process.
Yeah. And I think we've also, and that this has also just taken place through like playing and spending so much time with each other. I think after a while, we began to take on certain aspects of each other's musical voices. I feel like there's been more creative blend happening over the years as well, when I can sort of like, okay, we're playing this tune. This is what Jocelyn's gonna do, and then also you've been thinking the same thing about, okay, this Ellen's
Mm-hmm.
probably going to take, gonna take a fragment of the tune and build it. And so it's
You
been
can
interesting.
anticipate, yes.
Yeah, we've learned about what each other will do in certain musical points, which I think
Mm-hmm.
we've adopted that from the other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, final question. What does music mean to you?
Wow, that's a great question.
That's a big question.
For for me, music is life. Music is just such a huge part of life, such a huge part of the word connection keeps coming up, but connecting with others and the whole idea of being able to share this music, share the joy, share this passion for creating and sharing the music. That's very special to be able to bring that to other people, both through shows, through teaching, through recordings, any way to connect with others is really important for me.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate music for its externally connecting qualities, but I also think of music as simultaneously both external and intensely internal. I think it has the power to uplift, to console, to there are lots of
Mm,
emotions that we feel also internally while listening to music that goes hand in hand
absolutely.
with the communication aspect. And so it's complex and it's beautiful, and like all
Mm,
art, it gives meaning to what's going on in our lives. It's extremely
mm,
powerful.
Well, that's a
absolutely.
wonderful note to end on. Jocelyn Pettit and Ellen Gira, thank you very much for joining the show.
Having us.
Thank you.